Kate Falcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Um, Welcome back to all my returning subscribers, and a gigantic welcome to new subscribers. Thank you for everybody who's joined the membership. There's a lot going on back there, reminiscent of the old days that people might be interested in if you look into it. Irish Granny Helen membership. And check out my Substack, Ask Your Irish Granny. There's a lot on the public feed. There is a private feed. I put things over there that I often in the past had here because the censorship here has gotten pretty extreme and I'm tired of being in YouTube jail. So a lot of things over there. Big news this week. I'm not sure what the schedule will be, but Denise Siegel and I are reviving our podcast, Psychics and Psychos, where we do a deep dive into criminal behavior and psychopathic behavior. We dust off our certificates, licenses, and degrees and become armchair psychologists and detectives, and mostly psychologists. And we look at these crimes and these individuals, and then Denise does an analysis of their astrological charts, and I read the tarot cards. So having said that, welcome. And today I want to dedicate this video to a friend of mine who died probably about 10 or 15 years ago. We did Girl Scouts together. She was a remarkable person. She had a large family of adopted children and ended up actually adopting about 27 children, although not all of them lived with her at the same time because they were 3 generations of the same family. She had been a Catholic nun, and I don't know why, but she left the order and then became a teacher and a Girl Scout leader and an adopted mother. And I always found her to be this oasis of calm, and nothing fazed her. It was because I was spinning in circles around her, nothing fazed her. And she had wells of compassion and common sense. And one day she let it slip because I asked a leading question. I don't remember the context of the conversation. What I'm saying is this is not something she advertised. She would never have brought this up on her own. But she let it slip that she was a member of the Baha'i Faith. And I'd heard the term, but I knew nothing about it. And I knew virtually nothing after that, but she was the only example that I ever had of somebody in that faith. And it was really remarkable, the quality of the life she led, the model of service to others that she exhibited to the world. And sad to say, she died, but I would like to dedicate this to, and this is really her name, Joy. So we're going to talk today about the Baha'i Faith. We've talked about Buddhism. We've talked about which is more, depending on who you talk to, it's as much of a philosophy as it is a religion. We've talked about Stoicism, and I don't know why, but I felt compelled next in the list to talk about the Baha'i Faith. And I'll tell you, synchronicity. You'll see in a minute what I mean. So they don't call it just Baha'i, and I'm trying to be careful because, it's new to me. A follower of is a Baha'i, but the religion itself is Baha'ism. And these are followers of an individual called Baha'u'llah. Hope I said it right. And we'll look a little bit into the history of that. But They don't like Baha'ism. They don't like to be called just Baha'i. So you have to be very specific. It's from the Arabic and it refers to the glory and splendor of God. And the actual Arabic writing is an identifying symbol of the faith. It traces back to 1844. There was a merchant whose name was Bab, B-A-B, the bearer of a new revelation from God. The Shaykhi is what he called himself. And interestingly enough, this is a form of Shia Islam. It was rejected by most Islamic clergy, which you're going to find out why. It was originally called the Baha'i movement. And what I was going to point out about synchronicity, it began in Iran, and Iran has been in the news so much lately. I didn't know this when I started researching this. And I think, we are meant to perhaps take a moment and try to learn something other than what we see in breaking news. So he had followers. Some of them became extreme. They tried to kill the Shah. And as a result, they were arrested and executed. He was executed in 1850 for heresy. He was not best beloved by the mainstream Shia Islamic clergy because you'll see that his belief system challenged the mere existence of clergy. And, well, you'll see. It's a very interesting belief system. Thousands of his followers were then killed. It was pretty much a purge. He basically taught that God would soon send a new messenger. And this new messenger, you'll understand as we look at the belief system, that this is sort of how the Baha'i Faith works, that it embraces these new messengers or Messiah who bring knowledge from God, to basically updates. And the new messenger that he identified was a guy called Baha'u'llah, and he is the one, not the only, but the one at the time. Bab, B-A-B, and Baha'u'llah were closely woven in the historical context of the faith. Baha'is celebrate Bab's birthday, his date of death, and the day that he declared this information about a Messiah coming. And they make these part of their holy days. They have a number of holy days on their calendar. They're encouraged to read a book called Dawn Breakers, which is a history of the movement. And you're going to find that their scriptures are few and many. I will explain. It began in Iran and the Ottoman Empire. And by 1892, there were followers in 13 Asian and African countries. It slowly filtered into the West. It today is still very persecuted in Iran. The eventual leader became, after Bab, there was Baha'u'llah, and then when he died, his son, Abdul Baha, he took over and was respected. And then he died in the 1920s, and this ended the heroic age of Baha'i. Didn't end the religion, it's just a division in time periods. Bab's writings were considered inspired scriptures, so he kept many writings. I just gave up trying to write the titles of all of them, largely because the vast number, the majority, have not been translated. And so you wouldn't be looking for them to read anyway, unless you spoke, well, I'm going to assume Farsi. I'm not, maybe Arabic. So going to the second leader, Baha'u'llah, he claimed that he was a prophet, and he wrote to a bunch of other world leaders at the time. He wrote to the Pope, he wrote to Napoleon III, he wrote to Queen Victoria, and tried to present them with his inspired prophecies. His son, Abdul, he was exiled, and his son Abdul was in exile with him, imprisoned with him, and they got very lucky. In 1908, Abdul got released from prison during the Young Turks revolution. At which point he traveled and he spoke and he taught and he communicated to link believers around the world. By 2020, there are more than 38,000 documents associated with the founding people of the religion. Hours and hours of writings, personal writings, and only a tiny number are translated into English. Abdul then appointed the grandson of Baha'u'llah, I try to remember it by heart, whose name was Shoghi Effendi. And he was appointed as the first guardian of the Baha'i Faith. And he did this for 36 years till he died in 1957. This is, relatively speaking in global terms, this is a young religion. He spent his life translating all these texts and writings, and he really tried to codify the religion by expanding it and developing what they call the Baha'i World Center. So they have these two centers, two headquarters at two different sites. One is in, it looks like Acre, but I'm absolutely certain it's probably pronounced Acre, but anyway, and then Haifa, both in Israel. And at these headquarters, there is the in Haifa, there's the governing body, which is called the Universal House of Justice. So the Universal House of Justice is not really a building, it's a group of people who are elected, who are the ruling body. Shoghi built the administrative structure of Baha'i. In 1937, he put in place a 7-year plan for the Baha'i followers in North America. And what they do is they put a plan out for a number of years, and then at the end of that period, they revise it, they evaluate world events, and then they move forward. So 37 was the first for North America, then 46. And in 1953, they had a 10-year world crusade. And this was actually an international plan. It was an ambitious expansion plan. It included pioneers, which the name pioneer really is like missionary, except they stay there. They live forever where they go to spread the faith. Shoghi died suddenly without a successor, and in most religions, this would really cause problems. What happened here is interesting. Since 1963, the Universal House of Justice, the group of leaders, it's the elected head. They collectively make all the decisions. It's a leadership body. They implement Baha'i laws. They address social issues, and they care for the weak and the poor. They've led with a series of multi-year international plans. So 7 years, 9 years, 10 years, 7 years, however long they feel it's appropriate given world events. In 1970, they established the Ruhi Institution. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. In Colombia to teach Baha'i. In 2013, there were over 300 Baha'i training institutes around the world, including the participation of more than 100,000 people. And what they do, they have seminars, workshops, classes. They disseminate literature for those who want to come and get it. How to teach children the principles of the Baha'i Faith. How to teach compassionate social action and how to engage in the prevalent discussions of society, like the things that are the most talked about events or issues of the time. Every year on April 21st, they send a message, they being the Universal House of Justice, send a message to the worldwide Baha'i community, and they update what their priorities are and give them guidance for the next year. Locally, where there are local groups, they have an elected 9-member spiritual assembly. They also can appoint individuals for special functions. Like if you're really good at something, they will appoint you to do that something. They have no clergy. There is no individual leader like a pope or like the patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church. No clergy at all. This is, I would say, principally why they're not popular in Iran. Any male, now this would be, I have 2 issues with Baha'i, and since I'm making the video, I can express my opinions. I have 2 issues with them, which I'll point out. I found very disappointing. And the first is that any male Baha'i older than 18 is eligible to be elected to the Universal House of Justice, which tells me that women don't get to be the top decision-making, policy-forming leadership. I have a problem with that. And this is despite the fact that any other job anywhere else related to the faith is open to men or women equally. And and we'll talk about why it also is disturbing. Their 3 principal central beliefs are the unity of God, the unity of religion, and the unity of humanity, which we're going to dive into. God, they believe, reveals God's will through divine messengers to transform the character of humankind. So periodically, somebody will show up who is a Messiah, a messenger. So there's not just one Messiah, as you know, Christianity and Judaism believed. Christianity claiming it's Christ, Judaism still waiting. They believe that there have been a series, and each of them who is a bona fide messenger of God gets divine messages, and their purpose is to develop moral and spiritual qualities in humankind. This actually makes the religion very orderly and unified and progressive from age to age. They continue to reevaluate periodically moving forward to stay abreast of the times, which is interesting. They're not mired in the past. So their definition of God, I will tell you the characteristics they ascribe to God, who is the creator of all things in the universe. That's who God is. So they're giving this name to God, but they're not anthropomorphizing God. God's not an old man with a beard on a throne. It's not God the Father. They don't use those terms. God is only one. They're monotheistic. God is personal. You, as a human being, have a direct relationship with your creator. But God is inaccessible. We can't understand. God's omniscient, omnipresent, so all-knowing, everywhere, imperishable, eternal, and almighty. God and the universe are eternal and unknowable essence. God is conscious of creation, has a will and a purpose. What that is told to us by God's messengers, called manifestations of God. So they don't really use the term Messiah, but that's how it's defined in the description of the religion. When they talk about their messengers of God, they call them manifestations, which implies, that they're embodying the creator. And God is the source of all existence. God can be known through the perception of human virtues. By your acts you shall know them. That reminds me. They actually believe in a term that I don't think I've ever heard this term before, but it makes sense. Panentheistic. Panentheistic. In other words, signs of God are everywhere, but the reality of God is exalted and above the physical world. So that means, unlike many religions that says God is in everything, they say, well, God's not in all the things in the material planetary world, but we can see the signs of the existence of the Creator in the beauty and the mystery and the wonder and the love of the material world. So God is manifest through the material world, but doesn't exist inside of rocks and trees and all that. God is too great for us to comprehend, so just forget it. We can't do it. And we don't create or can't create a complete and accurate image of God. Therefore, human understanding of God is achieved through the recognition of the manifestation. So we have to be alert to identify who the new messenger is and understand what this messenger's revelations are. And it has to resonate for people. And they usually are able to tell you, oh, okay, this next person is the new manifestation. They use human terms because that's all we have. And that's why they say God is all powerful. They call him all powerful. They call him, well, they call God all powerful. They call God all loving. And as I mentioned, it's monotheistic. So what's the deal? Why are we here? The purpose of humans is to know and love God through prayer, reflection, and service to others. The Baha'i believe in progressive religious revelations. So I kind of touched on that already. Periodically, across chronology of time, an individual called manifestation will give inspired revelation that updates the belief systems so that they're not mired in the past, and they take into consideration the actual material world issues affecting humankind in the present. And they accept the validity of well-known religious leaders, with the founders of those religions seen as manifestations. So, they would acknowledge Muhammad, and they would acknowledge Jesus, and they would acknowledge others that I don't know because I haven't read their materials. But they don't Buddha. They don't dismiss others' belief systems. They embrace the ones that serve their worldview, which is about unity and service to others. That's basically, but women can't be at the top. Remember that. Their religious history is a series of what they call dispensations, gradual advancement in revelation. It's passed on, it's built on, we're given what we can handle, or what's the next thing to nudge us to more of an evolution spiritually. And then we work on that for a time period, and then there's a new manifestation who will give more inspired information. And it's always passed on, built on, and always suited for the time and place in which it's revealed. And it's always true in substance. There may be quirks about the details, but the basic substance is the same. And if new revelations contradict revelations of the past, they say that that is because we have evolved, grown, have a broader knowledge and understanding, because we've developed as humankind, and we can revoke the previous revelations with new and replace it with new ones as time passes. But some principles are timeless and universal, things like neighborliness and charity. Because they believe that all of this is cyclical, They don't think there are going to be new revelations for us until 1,000 years after Baha'u'llah. So when was that? The 1840s, I think. So 2840s. So they're not they've been acknowledged globally. They're not a sect. They evolved from Shia Islam, but they're not a sect of Shia Islam. They're distinct. They're linked to their Jewish and Christian roots. They believe that humans have rational souls with unique capacity to recognize God and our relationship to God. They believe that all humans have the duty to recognize God through these messengers, and the expectation is all humans would conform to the teachings of these messengers. And basically, they boil down to, they don't have, you notice they don't have strictures. They've got these broader philosophical principles: service to humanity, but they also encourage regular prayer and spiritual practice, all of the purpose of which is to bring the soul closer to God, the Creator. When we die, our soul separates from our body and goes to the next world to be judged. No more information about that. I mean, I'm sure they have opinions, but I didn't find it. They don't believe that heaven and hell are places. Heaven and hell are spiritual states. Heaven is closer to God. Hell is farther from God. It's not a physical place of reward and punishment. It's a description of your proximity to the perfection of God. And I guess that it can change. All of us share essential humanity. All of us are a product of the Creator. This is very Hermetic principle. They absolutely decry racial prejudice of any kind, except not really, and that's my second issue, which we'll get to. They believe in the abolition of prejudice. They embrace diversity and culture, and we should appreciate and accept the differences in people. They believe that racism, nationalism, caste, social class, gender-based hierarchy are artificial impediments to unity. They believe the unification of humanity is a paramount issue in religion and in political conditions of our present world. Unification of humanity, that's their big thing. In 1911, their social principles were the equality of the genders, really? Racial unity, world peace, and a whole lot of other what would be described today as progressive ideas, which were shocking for 1911. They said there's one ancient truth, which is the unity of all humankind. And the starting point for that is to establish the equality of races, the elimination of extreme wealth and poverty, the need for a united world federation, and the rest of what they say here is really interesting, especially for 1911. They were big supporters of the League of Nations and the UN. They advocate for a universal language, a universal standard economy and system of measurement, universal compulsory education, an international court of arbitration to settle disputes between nations. I think there's a little bit of that happening. You know. They advocate for the abandoning of nationalism and replacing it with an allegiance to all humankind. World peace can be achieved with a world-embracing security system. And they believe in these principles of spiritual unity, that religious revelation is progressive. It needs to abandon the past in favor of newer and more relevant revelations. Abandon tradition and independently investigate. That's their advice. Religion should be a source of unity, but religious prejudice is destructive and ubiquitous. Science is in full harmony with true religion. They want a world free of war. Over a long term, they want the establishment of peace and the purging of corruption. This requires people to unite under a universal faith with spiritual values and ethics to complement a material civilization. And I had a quotation, and like the absent-minded person that I am, I forgot to bring it up, so let me bring it up here. It was too long to, it's not all that long to listen to, but I get tired of writing things. So, okay, that's not right. Hang on. Oh, here, I can show you this. This is the symbol for the greatest name for God, and it's a very important symbol in their religion. It's pretty. Okay, hang on just a second, and I'll get this quotation because I think it's very valuable. So this is one of their teachings from Shoghi Effendi, the grandson of the founder. The independent search after truth, unfettered by superstition or tradition. These are the bedrocks of the faith. The oneness of the entire human race, the pivotal principle and fundamental doctrine of the faith. The basic unity of all religions, the condemnation of all forms of prejudice, whether religious, racial, class, or national. The harmony which must exist between religion and science, the equality of men and women, the two wings on which the bird of humankind is able to soar. The introduction of compulsory education, the adoption of a universal auxiliary language, the abolition of the extremes of wealth and poverty, the institution of a world tribunal for the adjudication of disputes between nations, the exaltation of work performed in the spirit of service to the rank of worship. So, who was the saint? Was it Saint Francis? There was a saint that taught that doing work with a glad heart and doing it for service to others was equivalent to prayer. The glorification of justice as the ruling principle in human society, and of religion as a bulwark for the protection of all peoples and nations. And I don't think religion in the sense that we think of institutions. I think religion in the sense of a moral code. Perhaps I'm inserting myself too much, but that's how I take it. The establishment of a permanent and universal peace as the supreme goal of all mankind, these stand out as the essential elements of their faith. Okay, and that is from Shoghi Effendi. Then they have what they call a covenant. They value unity, and they therefore created this covenant, which are the rules that they use to keep their community together. No member can claim inspired or authoritative interpretations of scripture. Either you accept that these manifestations, these messengers have given the most recent definitive stuff, or you just don't. You're not a member of the faith. Either you believe this or you don't. And if you believe it, you follow these teachings. And they're all about social justice and unity of humanity until they're not. And then individuals agree to support the line of authority established in the Baha'i scriptures. So they don't want you creating a schism. And this has worked. They've been very unified and free of fracturing over the last 180 years. There have been a few small attempts for schism. People are people, right? But those who try are called covenant breakers, and they're shunned, and it just never goes anywhere. So they have canonical texts, which are the writing of the Bab, the writing of the Baha'u'llah, the writing of Abdul and his son Sonji, and the Universal House of Justice, things that they come up with every number of years. The writings of Bab and Baha'u'llah are considered divine revelation. The writings of Abdul and Sunji are considered authoritative interpretation of the divine revelation. The Universal House of Justice, what they say is considered authoritative legislation and education, explaining. But there's a measure of divine guidance in all of the above. Most texts that they have strong emphasis on social and ethical issues. There are some that are mystical. This is one that I thought I would mention called The Seven Valleys, and it's written to a Sufi in a style of a Persian poet, and it sets forth the stages of the soul's journey. I thought that was interesting. The soul's journey towards God. In 2020, there were about 8 million Baha'is. It's the only religion. This is from an authority that I forgot to write down, but it's like a global statistical authority. Baha'i is the only religion to have grown faster in every UN region over the past 100 years than the general population. So it's fastest growing religion from 1910 to 2010. In sub-Saharan Africa, about 30% of the existing followers live there, and 27% are scattered around Asia, South Asia. And then there are smaller percentages in other places, and I'm, throwing too many numbers at you. In 2015, it was the second largest religion in Iran. So it's considered a world religion with no racial or national focus. So I think the best thing I could describe is like Catholicism is associated with the Vatican, and the Baha'i Faith does not have an allegiance to any government, country, nationality, or political force. Between 1920 and 1980, it was banned in the USSR and in Eastern European countries. In 1970 to 1990, it was banned in sub-Saharan Africa. The most intense opposition to it is in Iran. The Shia majority countries actively oppress and oppose the Baha'i Faith, and it has been defined that those actions have been described as genocidal. The head of the Samoan government was the first to embrace Baha'i as an actual official religion that was available to people. And I, on purpose, did not copy his name because it was really long and I knew I would mispronounce it. And it's available to look up, but I thought it was significant. Samoa, excuse me, of all places. Queen Marie of Romania, 1875 to 1938, was the first crowned head of any government to accept and promote the belief system. So I wanted to read to you something called exhortations. And I didn't want to write all this stuff down, and I'm going to take my time and summarize this. The exhortations are examples of teachings on personal conduct. I have a few bonds to pick. Anybody over the age of 15 in the religion should individually recite an obligatory prayer each day, doing this particular defined words and behavior. Also, daily devotional prayer and meditation and sacred scripture study. They should observe a 19-day fast if you're an adult in good health each year during the daylight hours in March, with certain exemptions, pregnancy, age, illness, youth. There are specific requirements for a Baha'i burial with specified prayers to be read. They do not believe. They discourage, but they don't forbid. They discourage embalming or cremating. Every Baha'i should make a 19% voluntary, Baha'is, I'm sorry, I said it wrong, should make a 19% voluntary payment on any wealth in excess of what is necessary to live comfortably after the remittance of any outstanding debt. So you provide for your living conditions, you pay your debts, then you are encouraged to make a voluntary payment. And this goes to the Universal House of Justice, and it's used for the programs of social justice that they do provide. Acts of personal conduct that are, these are prohibitions, acts of personal conduct that are prohibited or discouraged. So the very first one they mentioned is backbiting and gossiping. Darn. Drinking and selling alcohol are forbidden. Intercourse is permitted only between a husband and a wife. And here's where I start to have problems. It's forbidden premaritally, extramaritally, and between same sex. And they are very anti, they're homophobic. And it's got to do with creating children, you know, and they have a big belief in the importance of a stable husband and wife, man and woman, core family group as being really necessary to provide the stability for children to grow up to be decent human beings with ethics and social conscience. Women not being able to be at the top, and this, so that Baha'i goes on my list of yet another religion that I wouldn't follow. A lot of it appeals to me, but I have a real problem with this. Now, to be fair, they haven't changed it. They claim they're progressive, that they change things as the world changes. I think, to be fair, I would take into context their cultural origins and their philosophical origins, you know, from Islam. But, okay, but we need to know these things, and, you know, we have to be able to talk about them. This is my favorite rule. Participation in partisan politics is forbidden. And there aren't too many words. The whole thing about adult behavior, all of it, the whole thing, they are very clear to use the word forbidden. And then partisan politics and alcohol. Begging is forbidden as a profession. So the observance of the personal laws, like praying and meditating and all that, it's the responsibility of the individual. But you can get kicked out of the community for a public disregard of the laws, like if you make a big deal out of, well, I'm not going to, you know, or gross immorality. And I guess they define it. And these are administered by the National Spiritual Assembly. Okay, some laws are applicable now and dependent upon the existence of the particular Baha'i society. So what that says, what they're saying is that they abide by civil laws, like, you know, you don't kill, you don't burn things down. Laws not in direct conflict with the civil laws of the country are binding. Goes on to talk about the role of marriage in the religious belief system. The purpose of marriage is to foster spiritual harmony, to provide a stable upbringing for children. Quote, it is the fortress for well-being and salvation and the foundation of the structure of human society. So they haven't updated that yet. They discourage divorce. When you want to get married, and I think this is so interesting, when you want to get married, doesn't matter how old you are when you want to get married, and it doesn't matter if your parents are of the faith or not, the married couple has to get the consent of all four parents to get married. The only vow they take, their wedding ceremony, is just one simple vow. And the only vow they say to each other is, we will all verily abide by the will of God. Now, here's this next part, really threw me. They're good with transgender people. And they're good with transgender people marrying. If you have reassignment surgery. I'm very careful to say that. I thought that was so interesting. They have a very interesting take on work. Work is a spiritual practice. They don't believe in the aesthetic or begging, mendicant is how they put it, lifestyle. They don't think you should, like in Buddhism, the monks don't own anything. Everything is given to them as charity. They have a begging bowl and alms, Baha'i Faith would say no, they don't believe in that. They think that there is value in work as a spiritual practice. They believe in the importance of self-exertion, challenging yourself, and the importance of service to others. They don't have, a lot of churches. I bet you probably have never seen a Baha'i building anywhere. They meet in their own homes, and they do have some houses of worship around the world. They do exist. They do not preach sermons. There's no clergy. And the churches are, this is so interesting, 9-sided, because they believe, and they have 9 paths and they have 9 gardens in these buildings. I couldn't think of the word. They have a special calendar that was created by Bob. They have a 19-month calendar. Each month has 19 days, and then there are a few extra days tacked on like we do, with leap year and stuff. They do a solar year. The new year is actually the vernal equinox, which is Iranian. Once a month, they have the 19th day feast. Every month is named for an attribute of God. So there are 19 names for God that they name each month. Splendor, knowledge, that kind of thing. They do a 7-day week, and each of those days has a name of God. They have 11 holy days on their yearly calendar. And the symbol is the Arabic word and for Baha'i, or the wonder of God. And it also, that letter has the value of 9. They're into numerology. So their buildings are 9-sided. One of their other symbols is a 9-pointed star, which is the most common symbol. From the very beginning, the faith has been involved in socioeconomic development. They're very, very, very dedicated as an organization to advocating for the poor, the socially oppressed, and the vulnerable. They have actively worked for the greater freedom of women, which, of course, the area of the world from which they come, that would be a major issue. They prioritize women's education, they're providing schools, etc. And they do agricultural co-ops and medical clinics. The Universal House of Justice in 1983, they put out a letter, a release to everybody in the faith to try to be involved in social and economic development, even on a local personal level. So today, as a whole, the faith is involved in health, sanitation, education, gender equality, the arts, media, agriculture, and the environment around the world. They have a number of schools, including universities. By 2017, they had over 40,000 small projects globally, 1,400 sustained projects. So they're not the little project. These are the ongoing official projects, and 135 inspired organizations. They're big supporters of the UN, UNICEF, UNIFEM, and WHO, World Health Organization. They are considered apostasy in Iran. If you are living there and you practice the Baha'i Faith, your rights are restricted. The clergy despises them. The Shah in the 50s started an anti-Baha'i campaign. The Islamic Revolution persecuted them. They tore down their religious sites. They uprooted their cemeteries. There's photographs on the internet of what they did to their cemeteries. It's very sad. The claims against them are that they're not a religion, they're a political organization. But this has been researched by global justice organizations, and they say that there's no evidence of this. They're very involved in socioeconomic projects to better people, but not from a political or national motivation. It's driven by their spiritual belief. They've been accused of Zionism, and this has also been shown to be untrue. In Egypt, they are not well received. In the 1990s, the government of Egypt established an ID card system, and in that ID card, you had to declare whether you were a Muslim, a Christian, or a Jew. And there was no room for anything else. And so they refused to get an ID card. And this left them out of everything, like getting a driver's license, getting a passport, business licenses, everything. They became persona non grata in the Egyptian state. They couldn't lie. That's part of their religion. So they weren't about to pretend to be something that they weren't. So therefore, they couldn't work, they couldn't vote, they couldn't drive, they couldn't travel. But in 2009, Egypt changed that law, and on the ID card, they allowed them to just put a dash under religion. So that's not all the information out there, but that was as much as I thought I would inundate you with. And I hope you found that interesting. I learned a lot myself. A lot of respect for these people. Couple of bones to pick, but that's no big shock. And by comparison to a lot of world religions, they have a lot to be proud of. So let me know what you think. Thank you very much. And if you want to check out my membership, 99 cents, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into something UFO related. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back. Slongafoil, Slancha.